to this episode of the Lehigh Valley with Love podcast. I'm your host, George Wacker, and just a quick note before we get into this. We recorded this live at Godfrey Daniels in South Bethlehem with the legendary musical geniuses of the Lehigh Valley, Steve Brosky and Dave Fry. We talk about their history, what's coming up for them, Godfrey Daniels in general, lots of fun stuff. Thank you to our sponsors, Arts Quest, Molly's Irish Grill, which is right across the street from Godfrey Daniels, by the way. And of course, Michael Bernardin with Remax Realty. We're going to get right into it because I cover some of this stuff in the beginning anyway. So again, thank you for listening. We're going to be doing more in-person stuff and we hope that you enjoy it. Let's get to it. Steve Brosky and Dave Fry. I want to welcome everybody to the Lehigh Valley with Love podcast. We are honored to be at Godfrey Daniels in person. You know, we've done a lot of these things online in the last 2 years, but we're here with some legendary Lehigh Valley musicians. Steve Brosky and Dave Fry, and of course our esteemed co-host Phil Reese. We're doing one in person, so this is a lot of fun, and we appreciate everybody supporting us and our sponsors, Arts Quest, Molly's Irish Grill and Sports Pub, which is just across the street, and also Michael Bernardin with Remax Realty as well. So let's get into it. Thank you so much. We're so excited to be here. We want to talk about the space we're in, but then also the combined history of both of you guys within the Lehigh Valley, and so thank you guys for coming on.
If there was a Mount Rushmore of Lehigh Valley musicians, you guys would be on it.
You're going to take us for granted.
Oh, stop.
That is a great way to start.
Yeah. So, well, Dave, let's start with the fact that you founded Godfrey Daniels.
Right. Actually, it was our 46th birthday just last Friday.
Right.
Oh, wow.
Happy birthday, the first day of spring back in 1976. And I, with a group of local musicians and folk aficionados, decided we would open up a coffee house next door to what was the Lehigh Tavern, which was a hot spot. In fact, playing with my band Shimersville Sheiks, we played there all the time. Place was filled 6 nights a week. It was incredible. It was a great scene. It was a bar scene. But I got the inkling that I wanted to play in front of people who were not drunk. And also, I wanted to sit in an audience that was listening. So, and I felt there was a tremendous lack of that in the Lehigh Valley. A place where I could go hear and take in and see musicians do their best, but also have an opportunity to play on that stage in front of a listening audience. So that was the whole idea of that. And that's what we've accomplished. Still exists today, a listening audience. And Steve, you can attest to that, of being a player and having the audience listening to everything you're doing.
Yeah, it's here in the Lehigh Valley. This is not the cultural center of much of anything, but anyway, even going back as far as what you're talking about, the Lehigh Tavern and the listening room, the comparison of trying to pick a chick up over there and sitting down and listen to something going on musically, and this was one of the first steps of bringing some culture to the Lehigh Valley. Because I grew up here, Dave didn't grow up here, but I grew up here where my father and most people I knew worked in an industrial situation, worked at the Bethlehem Steel or the Western, these large corporations that employed thousands and thousands of people. And it was working class. And if anything, your local, where I grew up in Allentown, the neighborhood I grew up in, had ethnic churches that had social halls connected to the church. And your parents go out there and your dad goes there and drinks the night away. That was the culture of them consuming, alcohol back then. And on every corner, and there's probably a church and a bar all on the same and within the same block, and that was part of my neighborhood. But for Dave to bring this idea to the south side of Bethlehem, which was the heart of the steel company. And
the interesting thing that Southside had a very bad reputation. at that point. And one thing that gave us is we could develop under the radar, because it had somewhat of a negative reputation.
Poor part of town,
Poor part of town,
Yep.
and we could get away with stuff early on, that you couldn't have done in a historic Bethlehem. So that was interesting. It gave us, and there was a certain cachet of going down to the south side,
Sure.
and Godfrey's was pretty much the first alternative business back then, and before the restaurants and all the clientele.
What was this spot before?
Well, across the street was the New Merchants Hotel, which was a flea bag joint with a great front porch.
Alright.
And we had the Greasy Spoon next door, and we had Smuggler's Inn, which was a dive bar, and then the Lehigh Tavern next door.
Which is the current funhouse.
Yes.
Yep.
So we had our own little nexus of rebel music in a way.
Yeah. But to your point about it's for a listening audience, it's called a listening room.
That's right.
It's not a concert hall. It's not a whatever.
Which means people don't know what we're talking about.
So can you explain that like once and for all?
Well, you come here, and the emphasis is on giving the musicians the stage, and let them do what they do best. And that's why early on, when we didn't allow alcohol, it gave us that opportunity to develop that audience. And that was wonderful, actually. And then eventually we opened it up. You could bring your own wine. But at that point, we could guarantee that the audience was going to be respectful.
Sure.
And that made all the difference. That made it possible for the performers that play here go out on the folk circuit and tell their other performing friends on the folk circuit, national and international, that there was a listening club in Bethlehem where they treated you right. They gave you a good sound system. Cindy Dinsmore would feed you a vegetarian dinner and put you up overnight. And those were all the leading factors in getting the word out to the performers, and it happened real fast.
Yeah, and Cindy was another one of the founders of the
Yes.
Yeah.
And Steve, during that time, I'll get into what I read about you when you first began. You wrote a ballad for John Lennon.
Yes.
And John Lennon died 4 days after I was born. Not that that matters, but it's just a date that, when I'm reading the bios, it puts it in perspective in terms of just how long you've been, a musical force in the area. Can you talk about not only, you getting started in music in Allentown at that time, but kind of what the musical scene was back then?
Well, along with Godfrey Daniels, and there was a pretty healthy bar scene, and to point out how polite Godfrey's was compared to, this was an era when they made laws after us back from that period of time. Laws came into effect about, I got busted for pot a bunch of times, that whole thing. And, I was a notorious drunk and a troublemaker and all that stuff. And eventually they made laws. It became a rather conservative, approach to policing and all that bullshit. But can you say that?
Yeah, we're good.
But anyway, so Dave's point about the contrast of what happened here compared to answering your question here, there was a healthy bar scene of live music from infamous places in Allentown like the Cameo and the Lounge, and these are the kind of places you can order a martini or get into a knife fight, one of the two, and
On the side.
Or both. It's like,
on a good night.
Good evening.
But the Queen Victoria Hotel was sort of a hot spot, and there was this. I would have to think about all the places, but take my word for it, there was quite a bit going on back then, and as far as, and that was a bar scene basically.
But that meant the musicians could play 3 and 4 times a week.
Oh yeah,
Which doesn't happen anymore.
No.
The scene was hopping, and musicians could make a living doing it. Not great pay, but it was steady.
Yeah, you would set up on a Tuesday and play to Saturday. You know, some places like the Green Pines did that. And there was places out in Jersey, and back then it was 18-year-old drinking laws in New Jersey. And I mean, it was, you know, they made laws after us, I'm telling you. I believe that. And so, and then in comparison to, if you want to make a comparison to today, yeah, it's, what we had then was a going out culture. If you wanted to experience something, learn something, you had to go there.
Physically drive
That's right.
there.
That's right. You had to be a part of it. And today, you know, we live in a digital world. That's all I'm going to say.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you talked about the Queen Victoria, like going back to your start, the song King of the Queen Victoria was somewhat
right.
what kind of, I think what I read was kind of the reaction to that song was what made you feel like you wanted to keep doing that more.
Yeah, I wound up in the Betty Ford Clinic before it was the Betty Ford Clinic, let's say it that way. And that was in the 70s. And it was not until the late 70s that I, you know, stopped doing drugs and alcohol and all of that. And wanted to play. I felt I had some talent, and seeing guys like Dave that inspired me. Guys like Tommy Chris from you know, the Pickens Band and Pat Cushion, and I over the years got to play with some of those guys. But anyway, that was an inspiration to me, and trying to feel that I was blessed with some talent and wanted to go out there and do it. And I've been very fortunate where I've made that happen.
Yep.
And like you said, Steve, you're born and raised in Allentown.
That's right.
Dave, you came from upstate New York to come to Lehigh. Can you talk, I mean, just a little bit about why you decided to make your home in the Lehigh Valley then after that?
Well, Lehigh was the only university that accepted me, so
That's not
it was. But so it was cool. But it was at Lehigh that I was introduced to folk music and got involved with the coffee house up there called the Catacombs. So in a way, I started to play. I had a band, a jug band, the Graveyard Skiffle Band, and Charmersville Sheiks. So I could play. And then up at Lehigh, they started having concerts, bringing people in during the Great Folk Scare, where I would get to see people who I would eventually book, like Chris Smither, Pete Seeger came up, Elizabeth Cotton. Some mighty people came through in concerts and in folk festivals up at Lehigh while I was going there. So it was while I was up there that and while I was at home up in upstate New York, I got to go to Cafe Lena, which is the major, and that's where I first heard people like Loudon Wainwright. He opened for somebody, you know.
And in a space like this one.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was
like
inspiring.
That. So that was the impetus that made me start thinking that when I finally graduated from Lehigh, I would like to be able to try that. And so I was good friends with Bruce Watson, who ran the Lehigh Tavern. And I said, you know, I would like to try something like that. And he goes, well, listen, there's an empty donut shop next to the bar. Let's find out if we can talk to Justin D. Girolano, Esquire, Southside lawyer, and mafioso. And so he said, sure, Mr. Fry, at $300 a month, you know. And so we put together that, and in February of '76, and then in March we opened.
And you've been here ever since, which, I mean, this is when you always say when you describe Godfrey Daniels, it's one of the last remaining listening rooms, in the nation.
Yeah.
What do you think is part of the reason for it allowing to exist, even through all the things that happened before COVID? 40 years.
Well, it's a mix
long
of
time.
an audience that wants to see
Support it,
good people.
Listen,
Right.
And right there, and when Steve comes in, he does a show for this room,
Right.
like doing
Okay.
the Tom Waits thing.
Right.
That you
So
don't do
he's
anywhere.
doing a show that he
I don't
built
do it anywhere else.
for this room
Yeah.
and for this time. But also, it's the musicians who got the word out, who realized what a rare and beautiful thing it is to play in front of an audience that's listening. And artistically, it makes the artist work harder, right?
Yeah, I agree.
pressure's on.
I think reputation really is, quite the engine in keeping this place alive as well. But you're right. The audience that says, "Hey, I'm here. I know about this place or whatever. I'm here," and there's a certain standard you have to be as an audience person.
What's cool is when people come in for the first time, like John McEwen came in during the fall, and he walked in, he goes, "Yeah, I can see it happening here,"
Yeah.
and it's scratch and sniff,
It's a great way to describe, because when you walk in, the walls just like they're seeping history. You're compelled to, look at the posters on the walls and ask questions. It just has that,
And the acoustics too. Like when you walk into a fine theater or theatrical space, it just you can feel it. Like you can hear it basically.
We can
Well,
get
the
away
acoustics-
with a small sound system because
the acoustics are so good.
It bounces nice.
Was it like that when you just walked in
we
here, or
bought
did you do
enough
some things?
carpet. We bought enough carpet to put on the walls because I was thinking it was too close to the speakers. But once we got the carpet on the floor and an audience in the room, it was just came out perfect.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah, if there's a way to describe this place, I would say old school, in the sense that this resembles something from the Greenwich Village kind of era.
Yeah.
It has that same vibe, and somebody like McEwen coming in here, that makes that connection immediately.
but it's still relevant now, which is the really important thing. Is that we were just at a couple Mark Berardo.
Yeah.
We were at these shows that there's still these artists who want to come play here, and that's not going away, and that's something that's, I think, a testament to not only everybody here, but the
It's necessary to introduce this place to new players.
Sure.
And to a new audience, younger audience, because once you hear an artist that you really like, and once you're an artist and you come in here, you realize, I want to come back.
Yep. And tell other people.
Yeah.
To put it like layman's terms, if you've watched the VH1 Storytellers
Yep.
or those MTV Unplugged, or in that sense, where they will sometimes maybe even explain some of the songs before they play them or after
actually,
them,
that's
and
it.
it's
Yeah.
and that's a lot of what you do that we'll get into. But that aspect of you're more than a musician.
Yep.
You're also kind of furthering whatever tales you have to tell, and people connect to that as well.
Sure.
Storytelling is a big part of folk music, whether we own up to it or not. But that's how you connect. You talk. You establish a conversation through your music and through your conversation. People get to know you. You can't hide on this stage.
And Steve, it's hard for you to hide since you've been around for so long, and so many people know you, and you've played in Allentown and in the area for so long. How does it feel to continue to be able to do that? Again, we just talked about you started in the early '80s, and here you are, and we're going to talk more about your Tom Waits shows
Right.
that are coming up. But how does that feel to continually be involved?
Well, I'm very lucky that I still have the energy, and I've done a couple of shows with like Bo Diddley and B.B. King, and these guys were grandfather ages, and not that I'm not, but they are, and for real, and and I've always looked at the old blues singer going, hey man, they're
That's what I want to be. I want to be an old man.
That's exactly right. I can make it. I can do it. And so, yeah, really, I'm blessed in so many ways to be able to continue having that kind of lifestyle. And I have a great family who's behind me and allows me. And I wanted to point out, 46 years here, you know, some marriages, a lot of marriages don't last that long, you know. And exactly, that kind of percentage. But, and for people to be starting out today, I know Dave said it's important to hear new music, or younger people bringing new music. And I personally have not been able to connect to anybody on that level, seeing who's out there kind of thing. I'm sure there is.
Sure.
But and the traditional folk music, storytelling, all of that bled into, quote unquote, the singer-songwriter idea. And, you know, so I tell the same kind of story about the Queen Victoria, you know, I still ain't got a tattoo, you know, that kind of thing. And so it's all music is storytelling, you know, whether you know, even contemporary rhythm and blues or R&B or hip hop or that kind of thing, it is still storytelling because somebody is listening, can relate to it, you know.
100%.
Yeah.
It means something.
Yeah, totally. At this same time in the 80s is where you branch out into children's music. And it even leads you to perform on the White House lawn, correct?
Well, that before we begin,
Yeah.
my wife, when we first met, and I said, "Oh, I'm going to see Dave Fry for something." It's like he came to my elementary school in Hellertown and back in the '90s. But like that's the type of everyone knows Dave Fry,
Yeah.
whether you've been to his show or not.
Yeah.
And I think that's your work with children in Touchstone Theater is where a lot of that is.
I was with Touchstone Theater for 6 years, and just when it was miserable trying to get gigs, the Great Disco Scare, nobody was hiring except for Steve. Steve was getting all the gigs, man, I tell you. All the
playing a lot of disco
solo acoustic guitar, you know. Steve plays here. Oh, okay.
But let me say it this way. They wouldn't let me into schools. There was a court order against me playing those.
That's exactly right.
Touche.
So I was looking for work, and I was invited by Touchstone Theater to become part of the ensemble. So what we would do is rehearse in the spring, put together an original show, go out and do street theater with it, and then take that production out into the schools. And that's what invested me in playing in schools, thanks to Touchstone. So we had this cycle, and so then I started deciding, well, maybe I can get paid a whole lot better with PTA moms earning all that money.
Yeah. That's where the money is.
That's right. So I started doing solo, and then I put together a band called Rock Roots, a history of rock and roll, a 4-piece band with other Lehigh Valley musicians, and we started touring with that. And we're now in our 28th year of going to schools, and what we call is bringing Jimi Hendrix to Catholic schools across New Jersey.
Sneaking in.
Coochie coo, you know? Well, we get to talk about blues, we get to talk about swing. We talk, and we finish it up with a rap song, you know, and we're authentic, and we get, the hidden thing is they get to see a 4-piece band at an assembly.
Yeah.
And they're just going, oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, and that's to that point. I mean, you've done videos on how to play guitar and you know, instructional as well. Is it important to also kind of spread the love of music? I would imagine
Well, that's
part
what
of
I
the
see
fun,
it.
right? You just
That's
not
the
guitar,
hidden
you can play
message, is
anything.
they see me having a great time playing my guitar.
That's what this guy gets to do.
This is what I get. This is what I do. And so recently I've been doing residencies, songwriting with schools, usually in an after-school program once a week. I just finished a residency at Fountain Hill where we wrote a song called I Can Be Anything I Want to Be, trying to introduce to the kids in inner city schools that they can decide on what they want to be. They have to start looking earlier than in the suburbs. The suburbs are just filled with people who are doctors, lawyers, and everything. So we're trying to do is do that. And then I'm starting a new residency at Marvine on climate change. And we're going to write songs and create characters about these comic book characters like pollution and floods and so.
And hurricane should be a woman, by the way.
Well, it's in the sound,
Yeah. Or you'd have to call it Himicane.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so let's try kind of more get up to speed as we get to modernish times. How have the last 2 years been for you guys? I mean, clearly not as great as, obviously it's been tough for every musician. What did, maybe you individual stars, you see, what did you go through in those lives? Did you take more time to write? Did you kind of, I know we're going to talk about your upcoming shows in a little bit, but how did you deal with those down in that time?
I, like everybody else, was in the house. And what happened was the George Floyd thing happened.
Yeah.
And going through all of that and being moved by that, I wrote really quickly something called I Can't Breathe, was able to like copyright it in the same day. And the morning show on WLVR picked it up, and it got played through a lot of different stations anyway for a minute. And so that was the writing I did, and looked at a bunch of other songs. But it was mostly being paranoid and being like, this is lockdown, kind of thing. And I, like everybody else, was just didn't know what the hell was going to happen next, and made sure that my wife and my daughter and everybody was safe, and for that from March till like that July or August, that was really that was the hunk of time. Now getting into 2020, when that happened, I would say in the last certainly 8 or 9 years, maybe 5 years kind of thing, the market and culture, even in the Lehigh Valley, had begun to change.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Where there's more sports bars, and other than the bars that were playing music, a few of them just went out of business from the COVID. But a lot of places, there's so much competition out there to try to get an audience, and that's what it's all based on: asses in the seats. That's how you continue to work.
It's the truth, right?
Yeah, it is the truth. And but there's so much out there. There's so many places out there that you got to compete with, and so it's just been harder. I don't know. It's been harder.
Mm-hmm. And I guess I'll flip this to you, because Dave, you've been a radio, I want to say it correctly, like a radio director at least at WDIY for a while, or you did radio shows?
I was on the board of directors, but I've been doing shows there for a long time.
So you've worked with radio, and now with new technology, the Spotifys of the world and all that, do you feel like it's better, worse, or do you feel like it maybe even you can get your music out to more people, right?
Yeah,
right?
There's no way to make money off of it, though. You can't monetize it. Right. Nobody's buying CDs. If you do an online concert and beg for money, if you get $50, good for you. Right. But you also have to go out and buy the equipment that we see right here, so
that's an investment.
You have to keep up with the times and invest on the new media and everything. The way I faced it during COVID was to go into my kitchen, and I would produce one song a day and put it up at 3 in the morning, and I did that for 450 days in a row.
What? Wow. What do you do with these songs?
I put them on YouTube.
Oh,
so now I've got a library that you wouldn't believe.
We'll link that in the show notes. So it's and I also have a YouTube channel for my kids stuff too, called Dave Fry's Campfire. So it's Dave Fry's Kitchen Sessions. So that kept my head in the game. Mm-hmm. So I did all the songs that I knew. Went back to the old bands that I used to play, the jug band, the hokum songs that we did way back when, and work those up, and then make a video of it, and find the original 78
label of,
Digging through.
ain't no bugs on me, find out who did it, and then put that up every morning. And so I developed it. Once again, it wasn't monetized. I just did it basically for my own head, so that I would remain playing and work up songs that I always wanted to do. I finally got into the Beatles stuff because I went, oh, that's a great chord progression. I'm going to figure that one out.
One day, when I have some free time and the world has stopped.
Well, that was my opportunity.
Right.
Because I was just sitting at home. And it gave me something to work with. And so now I got a library. And so I'm still putting stuff up on Facebook, 3 or 4 in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I've found, just from the people who took time during COVID to say, this is not ideal, but what can I do? Like, is there anything that I can do to continue to work or to better myself or whatever? I mean, you're looking at what else.
Like Steve doing his songwriting,
Absolutely.
There's no excuse. You got to sit down and do something.
And Steve, how is it for you? We were talking about it, even 10 years ago. Is your music different than it was 15 years ago? And then I'm sorry, Phil.
No, you're good.
I know you're diving in, but have you progressed as
as you go along the way, something catches my ear that I'd like to cover, or my wife will point out. There was a movie where it was about this guy who impersonated Stanley Kubrick, the director.
Catch Me If You Can? Or
no, this was not that title, and it was John Malkovich who played the character. Anyway, at the end when they ran the credits, this song came on. I'm not the man you think I am, but I'm the man you found. And so she said, you ought to do that song. So, stuff like that happens. And, much love to Bruce Springsteen. People always ask me to do Bruce Springsteen songs, because
they built your career on that.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
Because you did it well.
And, so I don't like doing a lot of that, but there's a couple of tunes I'll do of his that I connect with. I mean, that very early Springsteen stuff, really tasteful. He played the Roxy.
Well, I was just up at the Roxy, and it's not like this. It's a movie theater, of course, but they have those posters up, and they have a million people. They have 2 of them because it's so large. They have to have 2, and they have the numbers on there, and you're just going through. And I'm thinking that would have been amazing. They were like metal bands, and then or like 70s, really hard rock.
Kiss played there.
Right, and then I posted online, and people were like, I was there in 1980, whatever, and the stuff was falling from the ceilings. It was so loud. Like, it sound like, I know that we're so technologically advanced now, but those types of things are so interesting to me, and the history of them is so nice that they're preserved. And that's, talking, being in this space now, it would be it's so great that it's continuing on.
Well, Bruce Springsteen did a 2-show night there. And in between the 2 shows, I meet Clarence Clemens. I have a bottle of wine and a bag of weed. And we wind up in a parking lot, and between he and I, we consume all of this. And of course, he goes back in to do the second show, and they throw me out. And I'm like, ready to fight somebody. And that was quite the ugly scene.
That never happened to me, Steve.
Dave is not getting kicked out of the Roxy. Yeah. He's being invited into an elementary school.
Right. A lover, not a fighter.
But it's so, that's the dichotomy of this in a positive way. It's so interesting because I don't want to say you're 2 different types of musicians, but you're different people who are
survivors.
Yes, you're different people who have found a way to be local musicians.
Talk.
I'm sorry.
I got poked. I wanted to hear a little bit more about the thing you were involved in, where you were promoting and supporting the early literacy through the arts. Because I think that's such a noble pursuit.
Right.
And it was this thing that was starting to show that if you brought arts to particularly, children who didn't have access to that, it would help them from a literacy standpoint.
Exactly. Well, there's a term for it. I'm a teaching artist, and it's a field, and it's recognized as that. And it's proven that the arts can expand children's ability to learn by giving them a different way of looking at things.
Yes.
I mean, it's obvious to us now, or maybe not so obvious to some educators, but it's, I've actually studied college level courses on how to do this and what actually happens to kids' brains when they're exposed to the arts.
That's what education should be doing, but doesn't do.
Exactly.
But something like the arts actually makes that mechanism actually work inside the skull instead of the football program. You know what I mean? And that's unfortunately the world we live in, where we have the wrong people who are can say this happens and that happens.
In fact, during COVID, I put together teaching artists of the Lehigh Valley, and we got together on Zoom every 2 weeks, and one of the teaching artists, whether it be a poet or a movement theater or whatever, would do an exercise, and then what we do is we break it down. Why did it work? What can you, as an artist, whatever you do, how can you use this in the classroom? And it's all there. It all makes sense. It's a science in a way. In fact, I was in a classroom yesterday at Marvine, and we were talking about climate change. And so one of the things I try to do is to involve the whole classroom, including the teacher. Teacher is part of that community.
You don't get to take a break, teacher.
No. So I asked the teacher, all right, how does climate change affect Bethlehem? Tell me. Sure. And he goes, whoa, that's a really good question.
It is, though. I mean,
it is.
Like,
but what happened was amazing. The kids got to see that teacher wake up, and then he applied
Use his brain.
Right, and also apply it. You go, well, we're supposed to plant, stuff in the ground, but we don't know if it's going to get too cold or too hot or yet. So he applied the arts, and he came up with something. And the kids got to see that teacher think on his feet. And so it's modeling, and that's kind of what you call it.
That's great.
And it's posing those questions too, in that way, like to make them.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
Yeah. I just think that it's like, if you look at some of the things that you talked about, like the teaching artist, like you have these like the state of Connecticut, you're honored as a teaching artist. The state of New Jersey honors you as a master artist. Like you have these wonderful, just recognition of the things that you've done to give back.
But we still have to fight to get gigs.
Right. Well, I guess that's a good transition back to music. That's exactly right. That was a way to apply yourself to make a difference and still continue to perform. But ultimately, you still want to be able to be in front of an audience and performing your music and getting paid for it, monetizing it in some capacity. And that's probably now a good transition to today. Like, how does that look here in Godfrey Daniels? How does that look in the Lehigh Valley in general? Like, where do you see this going for live performance?
Well, if I can jump in here.
Sure.
All of that, what you're talking about, you're still appealing to somebody. You know what I mean? There's somebody out there who would be far more impressed that you're endorsed by, blah, blah, blah. And there's somebody impressed that, hey, you can do that. You can do that. So it is the idea of music, especially live music, has always been, somewhat impressing women,
That's right.
Or men.
There's always been that part of it. And not that's...
I know what you mean. Yes.
Nobody goes out there and go,
get
listen.
girls. When I saw the Beatles,
That's exactly right.
They're doing something, right?
When they were on when I was young and they were on the Ed Sullivan show, the music was all right. It was the women who were just like fainting. That was impressive to
got
me.
my attention.
I can play those 3 chords. I can do that.
But yeah, and I mean, there's certainly a sex appeal about the whole thing. It's this whole ball of different attitudes and human possibilities in being a performer. And I think all music has an effect on people. Music is for the soul. And no matter what kind of music, it affects somebody. And except maybe some music I know about. But, there's a guy here on the south side of Bethlehem. I don't know if this is cool to mention.
I did go for it.
You can always edit this out.
I'll take a note.
Do you know who Jay Creed is?
I do know.
Oh, okay, so that's enough said.
I do. Oh, we're good? Okay.
Yeah.
We're good. But yeah, I am.
That's right. That's all you need.
So in the side of the gigs, and then maybe we want to have you guys play a little bit, but like.
Yeah, let's do, because we can finish with that if they want to play a song or two. But let's talk, to talk about now, before we get into what you guys are currently doing. What does it mean? I hate to use the term local musician because it's such
I hate it too.
Right, it's limiting, right? Because it's not what it.
It's not what regional.
Fine, regional. but to that degree, you live and you work in the area where you make a living through your music. I mean, so in that respect, local musician. Does it mean something to you to also, represent the area that you're playing in because you do? Is that something you ever think about? Like you're Steve Brosky from Allentown. That's part of it, and Dave Fry from Bethlehem to Lehigh Valley. I don't know. Do you?
I don't have that mindset. Now, people can make that connection with me, obviously, and singing the Allentown. Hey, now is so I definitely embraces that idea. But I think survivor is a great word that you just work your way through this, and you appreciate what you get, and you develop what you get, and you embrace what you love what you get, and that kind of. It's hard to answer.
Yeah, because it's not like local. It's almost pejorative because you're doing things that are being enjoyed internationally. We have people coming in here internationally. People listen to you all around the world. It's just that we have access to you. Maybe is the we know you because you play in so many areas and we're exposed to you so often that we kind of take you as our own in a sense of that.
Well, you're also taken for granted.
I wouldn't disagree with that either.
But also, we live in a world where traveling and getting paid correctly that's kind of those days are over. If you want to get on the road, and you better be able to, just have one sandwich a day, and find the cheapest gas you can to get wherever the hell you're going.
Do you see a solution to that? Do you have any thoughts on in order for musicians? I know young musicians. We know a musician. We love Seth Witcher, who's a young singer-songwriter. I'm sure you're familiar with him. That's a guy who should get paid for doing the stuff that he does. I mean, I don't know. Do you have maybe advice for a younger musician who's coming out in the same way you are?
I'm up for exploring venues that aren't necessarily bars. There are house concerts. There are libraries. For me, there are schools. You have to explore, and that I've actually approached Charter Arts here on the South Side, saying, let me talk to these kids about becoming teaching artists, because you'll get paid a lot more. You'll work in your own hometown. You'll be able to work from 9 to 12, and you're done, and you got a check. There are alternative ways of making money in your own town that aren't necessarily being a star in the bar.
Or even to augment that.
Oh yeah, just play all kind of things, play festivals. Put together a show like Steve has.
Which is a perfect. Do you want to ask him about?
Yeah, so the Tom Waits show, is that what you want?
Yeah, just like what's coming up.
So you have something this evening here in this space. Dave's Night Out. Is that every month, third Wednesday kind of thing?
We do it. It's a different idea of. I get some friends who are professional. We get up here on the stage and we play, improvise, and then we open up the discussion with the audience as to why we do what we do.
Yeah.
So that's what sets it different from just a regular gig.
Yeah, so if you're a young musician, you could come in and get that same kind of education you were talking about. Come in on it. It's the third Wednesday here at Godfrey Daniels.
Yeah, and hear the old guys pitch and moan.
And then your show is next Thursday,
March 31st.
March 31st.
And I'm very lucky that I can interact with everybody here and say, hey, I got this crazy idea. And we did it a few years ago, and it's Tom Waits' songbook. And, put a band together, that kind of thing. But, Dave and myself, we have a long history. And quite frankly, it was awkward and strange and almost criminal, I guess, to a degree, from back very early on. And I'm very thankful that I've been embraced here, and Dave and I've kind of reconnected, and we've gotten over that weird.
Well, at one point, I was hesitant to book people like you because you were working 3 or 4 times a week, and to get that bar audience into a listening room, I just couldn't figure out how to do it.
And it's good because you were saying where it's hard to I guess it's not hard. We describe what a listening room is, but to have that nuance of, wait a minute, bar person, coming in, there's a different
that's what Steve did. He developed
there's
the
nothing
show.
wrong. It's just like we're excited to go see Steve.
Every time he comes in, it's a different show, and he does it, and it's not
and you won't see it anywhere else.
No, exactly. Right. So that's where he evolved, and that's also how I evolved as a booker.
And it's so interesting to watch a show in here. I don't have to tell you guys that, but because it feels like you're doing a show just for me. There's obviously other people in here, but just the way that Godfrey Daniels is, and the way that you're sitting in the audience, it does really feel that way. It's a really special.
I only hope that we can soon see the return of the community events like the jams, the open mics. As you know, the open mic community is a family unto itself.
Absolutely.
Just the same with the old time jam. This whole room is filled with banjos playing in one key, and the improv comedy guys and girls. The Irish jam. We're coming back with the shows. But I think in May we're going to start up with the community jams, and that is a corollary to coming to see the professionals here, is to come here and do it yourself.
Would that be like your first piece of advice, if you're like, because people who don't know, what is Godfrey Daniels, and now all these guys are talking about it, now I'm intimidated to go there, I don't know. Would you just say give it a shot? I mean, also you can support, if you go to the Godfrey Daniels website, we have listed in our show notes, you can become a member, this much like with Arts Quest and other organizations, and support this in a grassroots level. Still, today.
Yeah. Yep. And we're looking for an intelligent audience who wants to come here, who will look up Steve on the web and listen to his music and go, that sounds, They'll come in the room and they'll know more about it.
Yep. And I love the idea that you're going to do something unique here every time. Like for somebody who saw you last week, they still would want to come see you here, because not only is the space special, because the acoustics are amazing. It's a very intimate thing that you're sitting.
And he puts
5 feet
together
away.
a great band.
Right, but you're doing songs and performance in a show that you wouldn't have seen anywhere else. And I think that's really cool.
I'm very lucky that I have met and know a boatload of musicians here in the Lehigh Valley, and Dave knows a boatload of musicians as well. And but it's something that I've always been attached to, even with my bad habits, was in the bars. I'm going to do. I can't wait to get off work, and a few of the lines were, I don't mind working because I used to be jerking off most of my time in the bars, which is, this is all Tom Waits lines, But it's truly, I relate to that, and Tom Waits and I are probably the same age, and he. I have a few, actually, I noticed a book that was here a long time ago, and I wound up in getting it. And there's a great thing they're talking about. Bruce Springsteen and Tom Waits came along basically about the same time, when which record company was going to do what with what and all of that. And the guy who wrote the book said he was betting on Tom Waits. And of course it was Bruce Springsteen who became mainstream, and Tom Waits is the cult hero, and again, as far as a brilliant writer, as far as a creative mind, Tom Waits is a genius, you know, in so many ways. You know, to the line that stop all your crying, it won't do you no good. Come down off your cross, we could use the wood. You know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, I can hop out of here so that you guys can play.
I mean, this is very impromptu, so I don't know what you guys, do you think you could do a song or two, or you could do it individually or together? I don't know, whatever you guys.
Why don't you do one?
Yeah,
Why don't you do half a, do it.
Actually, Dave's band was one of the first few times that I got to play this live, and our friend Paul Willestein was in the audience at the King George.
Oh
Yeah, there's a story, I read this story. Yeah.
And it's just them 3 chords, you know. I can get it into. Yeah, I'm gonna be the king of the Queen Victoria. Yeah. You tap that waitress on the shoulder, get me a beer. Yeah, I'm gonna be the king of the Queen Victoria. Yeah, they're gonna say, hey man, where you been all of these years? Now you can see Slim Pickens there.
They were great.
Once a month they were. When Dusty Rose show up, yeah, the kids get awful drunk. Now you know Fang from Gazer T. Yeah, he dresses like a monk. And it's Johnny's dance band, playing all that disco funk. Yeah, but I'm gonna be the king of the Queen Victoria. Tap that waitress on the shoulder, give me a beer, Schmitz. Yeah, I'm gonna be the king of the Queen Victoria. They're gonna say, hey man, where you been all these years? I'll play a little bit there, play a little bit.
Make them weep.
Yes, sir. Last Friday night.
I remember.
Like I got it into the place by its long beer light. And then I seen these 2 girls on the floor. They got into a fight. I thought to myself, man, that's really messed up. I kind of like it, but I know it ain't right. Yeah, but I'm gonna be the king of the Queen Victoria.
Not the King George, the Queen Victoria.
Have that waitress on the shoulder, give me a beer. Schaefer's. Yeah, I'm gonna be the king of the Queen Victoria. They're gonna say, hey man, where you been?
Just like that.
Yay!
I think sounds great.
That did sound. Thank you. Now I own that. That is on my podcast. I'm so excited. Okay.
Make sure you pay them.
Yeah, that's a good point. Do you accept Bitcoin?
Oh yeah, right. My wife would kill me.
Phil, get over here. I just want to say one more thank you to you guys so much.
Thank
Steve,
you.
Brosky, and of course Dave Fry. We're Godfrey Daniels. This episode is going to go out right before Steve's next Tom Waits show here. However, if you're listening to this a year from now, please be sure to check out their websites. We have them all listed in our show notes, or just do a Google search for Steve Brosky and Dave Fry, Godfrey Daniels. And I guess the important thing to take away from this is to come out maybe and experience some of it, to help support, because it's with that support that places like this are allowed to go on for 45 years, and without the community, it's not possible.
Yeah, we need groceries too, right?
That's right.
Baby needs a new pair of shoes.
So, thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
And you guys promoting this, banging this drum of culture here in the Lehigh Valley, I think it's a great story. My philosophy has always been, growing up here, is the Lehigh Valley has always been in the shadows of Philadelphia and New York.
Yeah, sure, exactly.
But it's always been its own weird, it's the weird stepchild, the redhead stepchild.
Amazing people have come out of this valley.
A million%, yeah. But
Folky's John Gorka,
Yeah.
Moravian graduate.
Zen for Primates.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they're
Incredible
music,
people. And
and even going back to like Jay Proctor, John and those guys, and the Shillings, these were bands that certainly nationally and regionally were recognized. And
it's because the place was small enough we could develop our craft without having to go up against,
Right.
The machine.
South Street.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right, and you're fine. I mean, this is just me talking, but I think you're finding some of that. I'm at a point now where I really love my city,
right,
and I love where I live, and I want to see all the beautiful parts. Maybe the bad parts too that need to be fixed. But this is one that's such a treasure that it's almost a crime not to at least to put your attention on it for a period of time if you live here.
Did you grow up here?
I didn't. I went to Moravian College.
Okay.
I've been here for 20 years. I grew up in the northern Poconos. So I'm much like Dave. I'm a transplant who came here and said, this place isn't so bad. I'm going to stick.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I'll tell you, I grew up hating being around. This was so... first of all, you're growing up and, you hate life anyway to a degree, you hate your parents. But anyway, but certainly knowing that radio and television was like everywhere except here, it was like, that was bothersome. And and it took me a long time to come to terms with a lot of things, from getting into how I felt then into how I see it now. But anyway.
Yeah.
Which is...
We're happy you stuck around.
Yeah.
In Tom Waits' I Don't Want to Grow Up, there's a line where, I don't want to leave my hometown. I don't want a big old loan. I don't want to work my fingers to the bone. And then the conclusion of that little verse is, I don't want to, get married, boom. How the hell did I get here so soon? I'm all grown up,
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, I think, in a portion, I'm 40, and I look at that now, and you're kind of like, what if? And then some of it's like, well, I've got it now, and I'm excited to be a part of it. So, I'm excited to be here on stage talking to you guys prior to your show tonight. And
you'll get over it.
Dave, I'm trying to be like optimistic and positive.
No, well, that's the Lehigh Valley in me. So,
Totally.
You're right. That is the Lehigh Valley.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a good sentiment to leave it on. We're here, skeptically, but definitely optimistic in some senses about the future. And thank you guys so much. Thank you, Godfrey Daniels, Dave Fry, Steve Brosky, of course, Phil Reese, our co-host. Thank you to our sponsors, Arts Quest.
Thanks.
Thank you. To our sponsors, Arts Quest, Molly's Irish Grill and Sports Pub, which is across the street from here, and of course, Michael Bernigan, Max Realty. And check out all this information we talked about, everybody's YouTube channel. Everything is in our show notes, so please peruse and follow and subscribe. And
become a member of Godfrey Daniels.
Yeah, come down. We want to see your show.
Yep.
All right.